Right now, though, we're bringing to you the Graphic Communications Group Limited in partnership with the Fidelity Bank Limited are holding a day's breakfast meeting, which is dubbed Graphic Fidelity Economic Dialogue. The meeting is bringing together former and current ministers of finance to discuss the state of the economy. The meeting is at the Alisa Hotel, not rich here in Accra, and my colleague Roland Walker is on standby now. I'm handing over to him at the Alisa Hotel.
Well, thanks for joining us. The event here at the Alisa Hotel, where we're having the Graphic Fidelity breakfast meeting. And of course, we have all the gurus in business here in Ghana, those who matter, not only those in private enterprise, but also those who take their hard policy decisions on behalf of government and the state. Well, we have with us the Chief Executive Officer of the Private Enterprise Federation, and also Bonso has joined us. Now, we know that the meeting will start in a bit, but basically coming from where you're coming from and looking at the announcements already made by the president and really the hardcore decisions that need to be taken, do you think that as a country we really have the guts to take some of those hard decisions?
Well, good morning.
Morning.
And good morning to your audience. I think I'm hopeful we do. But so far the records don't show that. And if policies are going to be translated into implementable activities, then we have to make the hard decisions, as you said. The hard decisions involving the redirection of the economy. Because as we see now, the economy is unraveling. Interest rates are high, inflation is high, tariffs are high, cost of doing business is high, unsustainable utility delivery. So looking at that, there's no place to go but up. And but up means that we have to make the tough decisions. So I'm hopeful that the government policy makers will listen, dialogue with business to identify the areas where we can stimulate the economy and then take the hard decisions as to who is going to drive. Because as you know, in our history, it's always been public sector driven. And if we're going to go anywhere, it got to be private sector driven. And if it's going to be private sector driven, but you have to listen to the private sector, where it hurts, where they can make a difference, where they can stimulate, and then both together with government, provide the resources and the management expertise with private sector is flooded with to direct the economy forward.
Logically, over the last decade or two, the interaction with the private sector, especially in the last decade and decade and a half, has been very brisk. And you see that the private sector is forthcoming with what the players need to have to make sure that we have the necessary structures. Now, coming from where you're coming from and your interaction with the big guns in the industry, what do you think really are the structures that Ghana needs to hinge its forward going or forward marching on?
The forward march depends on the sectors of the economy that we can stimulate immediately, like the agricultural sector. Agriculture, let me use the value chain approach for agricultural sector. If you provide about 60,000 metric tons of soybean, it's going to influence the poultry cake that poultry farmers use. The poultry cake will now translate into effective, good quality poultry feed, which will influence the cost of the production of poultry. It's not only going to feed the people for food security, it's also going to remove or reduce the import of poultry, saving us foreign exchange. If you take the other side of agriculture, where you produce for the local brewing industries, those imported barley and wheat and others, we can substitute sorghum, cassava, flour, and others. If you take the confetti, the bakery and others, we can also do the same. So if you look at agriculture as a value chain approach, providing the raw material base for the processing, then the off-takers already in the country, I think there's one way to go. Then there's always government being the biggest spender, the purchaser of goods and services. If government were to put its money where its mouth is as a policy, where do we go? Let me give one example. In the furniture industry, if government of Ghana is going to definitely influence that, all they need to do is that buy every furniture for government offices from Ghanaian artisans. They said, well, the quality is not great. Give them advance money to buy the equipment to create the finishing. And once they pay, they deliver, you take your money back.
Well, Nana well said, but the practice has not always supported the case. Because we've had a larger trade deficit over the last decade or two, and more importantly, because we've seen a private sector in which we've had a growth in the retail sector, where we're more import-driven and import-dependent. Even if you look at the value chain system, as it is you describe for agriculture, the poultry farmer may produce, but the point is the imports are that high, and they're even cheaper.
Yeah, because of the cost of doing business, the cost of the production. Because if we were to look, the poultry farmers are taking their cost of money from the micro institutions. So at a cost which is so high, 27, 30%, where the big players are taking their money at 12.5. So if you were to translate the 12.5 cost of money to the poultry farm, the cost of production of the poultry would be lower. And if you were to substitute local production, and the president said that in his independence speech, let's patronize Ghana, made in Ghana goods. He's the first citizen. We want to see the policy implemented from government top down. And if that happens, obviously the private sector will be able to deliver what we need to do.
How do we make sure that perhaps in the next 5 years, if up to that very period is the start of a medium term, so to speak, supposing on the scale of preferences or how we have to go up the trajectory, that is how we want to perhaps absorb ourselves out of this very import dependence. How do we start it? Do we say that gradually we reduce the importation? Because we can't all of a sudden have a very perhaps buoyant local industry, whether it's poultry, it's furniture, etc.
You can. We have what we're talking about, a stimulus package, which is a 12-month activity where you can, sorghum, soybean, they all 110 days. So if you can get 2 cycles of 110-day production, you can influence the production of poultry. We're not saying that abrupt cut of imports, but gradually within the 12-month period, we can make tremendous impact. If we cannot reduce it more than 50%, less than 50%, I think we can do more than 40%.
A laudable idea. How do you make sure you take the policymakers with you, i.e. the Minister of Finance and the whole executive and legislative body?
Dialogue to bring into the discussion as to the kind of analysis that we have that can influence what the decision is. Because if they don't know and they don't want to hear, and we don't provide that information, there's no way that we can all move in tandem, step by step, to move the economy forward. So dialogue is the last time private sector met with government was 6 months ago, and we have had issues with tariff issues, cost of money issues on Bank of Ghana directive. These missteps, and I call them missteps, Government of Ghana, from the Office of the Presidency, issues a directive on insurance, only to retract it after a month or 6 weeks. Bank of Ghana issues directives, only to retract it.
So you're saying that level of inconsistency doesn't give you confidence?
Thank you. You said it, and that's what business is feeling now. How do we go forward? How do we strategize as to what we do because of these inconsistencies? We want to sit at the table. Let's talk. And, it doesn't take anything away, and then you can get the benefit of what private sector is looking for.
Okay, let's get the scenario. So you have the master of the house who's supposed to be the all-he-man or super person or superman. He's supposed to take the steps.
Yes.
And if that person perhaps staggers in his path, what happens? It gives you the person behind.
The whole ladder staggers. The whole thing, everything staggers. And then the house of cards falls apart. And it looks like unless we take bold steps now, the future is not what. I'm hopeful we can take the bold steps, because we have all the other things that with the right decisions together, because we can create jobs, we can impact on the economy, we can create the export mechanism. Cocoa should not be the only thing. Value addition to everything we export. Let's make a conscious decision. Everything exportable from Ghana should have value addition of at least 50%. Do you know how the percentage of increase in jobs that would create? A whole lot of. The poultry thing that I talked about, the research that TechnoServe did from a few years back, if we put it together, it will create about 648,000 jobs. What are we waiting for?
Now, let's take it from the point of the players in the private sector. We still do know that we have a lot of startups and small businesses that still don't have the requisite human resource, still don't have the needed capitalization to undertake a number of the businesses for which, supposing we have this very revolution, as you seem to paint it, they could adequately participating. How do you then roll them in?
Well, we are aware of the shortcomings of the private sector, capacity, both resource and human capital. These are things that you can develop. These are things that you can provide. But without the necessary market, there's no way that you can. Private sector will not get up and say, okay, I'm going to hire 2 people for the sake of hiring. No, they only hire people because they gain market share and they need people to maintain the market share. Let me take an example of the construction industry. Government of Ghana said they're going to construct 200 schools and a number of hospitals, and they're going to use brick. Laudable idea, laudable policy. Where's the brick? We don't have it. How do you get the brick to be provided? Lead the private sector that we're going to spend about 40 million, 50 million. So private sector says, okay, there's a bacon somewhere that we're going to go tackle. So now let's go build the capacity to produce the brick that government can use. Unless we sit at the table and say that you're going to spend X and we will invest Y, there's no way that we can get together and do it.
Over the last few years, each year when we have the fiscal policy or the budget read to us, we are made aware of various funding sources that are available. Have they been accessible to the private sector?
No, not really.
Why?
How do we
have a dive, etc.?
We have the biggest
you don't
fund.
Have the capacity to
the biggest fund that we have is ADIF from the governmental side. How much do we have in ADIF? I don't think anybody knows. Where is the money from ADIF? These are tariffs that taxes that were taken out of tariff 0.5% previously, now increased to 0.75 and paid into the ADIF account, supposed to be available for private sector investment.
And you're saying
what percentage of that is now outstanding? How much money have we kept in the bank? So that's where we said that bring the money out, because it's supposed to influence and catalyze the growth in the private sector. And if private sector doesn't have access to these resources, there's no way that they can create anything in a vacuum. So we have to look at, but there's so many things that we're talking at one time. We want to create X fund, Y fund, B fund. Where are the resources to feed the funding? So let's have one holistic fund. We direct it if it's for private sector investment, micro institutions. We direct it for education. We direct it if it's for innovations. But let's have a fund that we can be sure and comfortable that the resources to provide the funding is available and the access is made simpler and easier for private sector to tap into.
Going by our interaction, we seem to know what really the problems are. And actually, we've known over the last couple of years, if not decades or a whole century, so to speak. Where lies the prognosis? How do we make sure that, well, this is the diagnosis we have and this is perhaps the medication for it?
Information. How do you get information? Unless you sit across the table and get information provided and analyzed, that, as you said, we know our problems. Do we have the answers? Yes, we have the answers. But it started in a way that is not cohesive. Let's sit together. I keep insisting on sitting together. Yesterday we had a meeting, the Private Enterprise Federation and its members had a meeting with the governor. We brought attention to some of the directives that are going to cloud and limit the ability of Ghanaian businesses, like the margin accounts, like a section that prevents private sector from using foreign currency activities. If I'm in a Ghanaian business, in Ghana, and I want to use a foreign currency to hedge my exposure in an activity that I undertake, that limits us. We brought that to the attention. The government recognizes that. We have a subsequent meeting coming up to address these things. But if we had sat at the table, we would have made those kind of errors before we come out. We could have said, okay, let's hold off. And then you come out with the holistic policy, the information base. The government told us that they're publishing a little publication that is going to give information as to boost the confidence of investors, and nothing has changed. That on the GIPC law, things that they were promised are still available. But we could have done that together with the issues of the directives, not to confuse the public. But now we're stepping back to make amends. So these are things that I think that if private sector is engaged with government at all levels to discuss what you have in mind, to also bring attention to what the impact would be, I think we all can do better for ourselves.
If you look at the annual report over the last 2-3 years of the GIPC, you get to have the feeling that really what the statistics show have been it. The foreign direct investments have just been inching up. The point is, how does that benefit the private sector locally?
Thank you. I think that's the crux of the matter. You touting foreign direct inflows, foreign direct investments, they come with Y, and they go out to Y+1, because they invest and they make money and they take the money with it. Okay, but do you think that if you had done the same type of tax exemptions in the local investor, where the residual value of what they do remains in the country, could you have had a better impact? There's definitely a way to marry the two. Foreign direct investors come in. Why do we need foreign direct investors? Two ways: resources and technical expertise. Now, if they come and do business on their own without a partnership, how do they provide or transfer the technical knowledge to anybody? I'll give you two examples. One is the tobacco industry. We used to have a booming tobacco industry in Ghana. When they have had their fill and they left, what's the impact? A vacuum in the tobacco industry.
Because there was no transfer of
skills
and technology?
Thank you. Okay, so, but if you insist that now we're going to give you tax exemption on the basis of the rules of engagement, A, B, C, D, you have to have a partner, local, 30 or 40%, whatever it is, you go find it yourself. That's what will qualify for the tax exemption.
Which is also,
no, it's not in the law. That's what we're proposing, that if you're going to do that, then the foreign direct investor knows the rules of the game before they come. You don't want them to come in first and then they don't business repatriate, as we're accusing the telecoms that they once causing the hemorrhage. That is unfortunate. They're not the ones. They're doing business as they were promised.
I was interacting with some members of the AGI, Association of Ghana Industries, and they particularly mentioned...
members of PEF, anyway.
Definitely. And they particularly mentioned the oil sector. Well, we've had a lot more inflows over the last 5 years. But the point is that if you do a content analysis of the bulk of those inflows, really, there's no local expertise or partnership, no transfer of skill or technology. As a result of that, there's huge or massive transfer of fiscal, and as a result of that, at the end of the day, there's a vacuum created at the end of the fiscal period. And that overall also sums up the difficulties we're having. Do you also share in that very analogy?
Well, we share in that analogy, but we share in the premise that these were the rules of the game that they were provided with. They have not done anything wrong. They were promised, you come in, Ghana has a free market, you can repatriate whatever you make and you're profitable. And that's exactly what they're doing. We should have come out with it to the table and said, okay, we will let you provide the investment, we'll let you provide the returns to your investors, but on condition that you invest maybe 25% within the next 5 years before they transfer it, or reinvest in certain categories unrelated to what you do and before you and then they will know what the rules are. But what we had done is give them blanket without any direction, and then we tend to accuse, which we think is wrong.
Okay.
So what we want to do is sit at the table and say, these are the rules of the game.
Dialogues like these will help?
These are information dissemination, but dialogue with the policymakers at the table, not in a public forum where we can. It helps definitely, because then they will be equipped with the technical analysis that we provide and bring to the table.
Well, thank you very much, and we've been speaking to Nana Osebo. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with us this morning, and we hope that as you have a lot more interaction with government or the policymakers and also with your membership, we could have headway as far as getting some solution to the current difficulties that the economy is facing.
I'm grateful for the opportunity, and we think the way ahead is great if we make the hard decisions.
Well, thank you very much. You've been watching the CEO, the Chief Executive of the Private Enterprise Federation, Nana Osebo. So right now we'll go to the studio. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Franklin Kujo of Imani Ghana. You're still watching the Graphic Fidelity Breakfast meeting taking place at the Ridge Arena of the Alisa Hotel. And in there we have a lot more members of the NGO community, think tanks, as well as policymakers, and those who make matters matter in the world of business here in Ghana. Well, we'll have to continue the discussions. We have with us the Executive Director of the Imani Ghana think tank, and always making those pronouncements on issues of policy, how they influence policy direction in itself and also the economy. Thanks for joining us, Franklin Kujo. Now, more importantly, what have you not been very much impressed about all the things that have been said by the state, by government, about how to improve the economy in the last couple of weeks?
Well, you certainly have to say that I'm always unimpressed. Isn't that the case? No, that's a joke, by the way. I would say that until this event itself, I was really worried as to whether there was, if you like, that fatherly figure that would bring us around to discuss our perilous times. And I thought that clearly the economy had taken a tank. There's been a lot of issues back and forth as to who caused it, but that's a different discussion, really. I think we are where we are today largely because we haven't had the opportunity like we are having today in order to discuss, without all the spin, really, what the true state of the economy is. Not that we don't know. You and I go to the market, and so we are not oblivious of the facts. But there must be a certain level of honesty, really, brought to bear on our national affairs. And today's program, I'll see that in that particular light. I mean, to have former finance ministers speak on an issue as sternly as the economy, then we can possibly salvage the dwindling image of the city, for instance, and then hopefully there should be salvation from the summit.
Okay. The point is that if the fundamentals are always not right, not often right, they have trickling effect on every sector of the economy. And well, it just didn't start with the city, and I've followed your own comment, not necessarily you, but your organization's commentary on a lot of issues. And when it comes to fiscal policy, do you think that the current steps that have been announced, not taken yet, but announced by the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Finance is the right way to go? Well, those initial ones with the Bank of Ghana, which now had been some withdrawals and some adjustments, etc., and all those announcements about available fiscal funding opportunities for the private sector just to show up whatever differences they have, particularly because we are a very high import-driven country.
Well, you started off on a very important note that, most of the issues we speak about, and it's not just Imani, but most of the think tanks, most of the time are related to what we call the policy incoherent space. I mean, if you think and if you go back in time, not too long ago, when we were essentially, multiplying the wage bill, when we were increasing the wage bill, it was sounded, and most important, I think, Emmanuel sounded the warning that Armageddon was waiting to happen if the wage bill continued to be treated the way it was going to be treated. But you understand that we came through an electoral phase, and then we quadrupled the wage bill almost, and it was seen as a blessing. After elections, we were told it's not a curse. You see, there you have the definition of policy running ahead of itself without necessarily having a recourse to the nature of the economy that we have. If we were doing that and you were generating enough revenue from within, as per your export, then probably you can be spared the splurge. You can choose to do whatever you want. But if there was no corresponding, attempts to shore up your revenues, then clearly you were just waiting for Armageddon to happen. And we are there right now. But as I say, clearly speaking, all these other measures that were taken by the central bank, really, we should have seen them long ago. And by the way, the solutions to me are not really the best. I mean, you could see immediately that there could be some the CD seems to be stabilizing. But that's just one part of the story. I mean, clearly this panic situation, so people would yield to the resource. But it's not helpful in the medium to long term, because projects that have been costed already before these interventions would be affected going forward.
Now let's look at the interventions we need to take as a country for the medium to long term possibilities of turning around whatever difficulties we're currently facing. How do we start following that announcement by the president and subsequently in his speeches the last couple of weeks?
Well, first of all, do no harm. I would support the CD really falling to take its true position. Then you like we say in comic balance, then you see your smoothness level. Then you determine that this is exactly what the CD is about. The other measures that ought to be taken should have been taken yesterday anyway. And I say yesterday because we already know them. Boost your exports, but more important, make sure the production cost, the space for production, it's welcoming enough. You can, and I do love the president when he cites my friend Tony Senaya for making shoes and we should be buying made in Ghana stuff. But the problem with that type of approach is that the likes of Tony Senaya operate within an environment where the cost of doing business is high, electricity is obviously wobbling, water, and all these issues have got to be part of the solution. I would think if the president says that cocoa, we should value chocolate, which is part of the story really, what happened to adding value to our cocoa? Because you see, if you did that, you are creating, along the supply chain, a lot of jobs will be created. So the solutions are there. They are yesterday. And
so we know the solutions. We're just not taking the concrete actions.
We've got to be bullish about it.
Within all this, Millie, is also to take policy directions that would also inure to the benefit of the overall structure. Now, we have, for example, we're supposed to build 200 schools, and that's a huge capital expenditure we need to make. We need to build roads. We need to build health facilities, etc. Just in about 2-3 minutes, as we wrap up, how do we do all that whilst at the same time trying to show up whatever fundamentals we have in the economy?
Well, first of all, you need an envelope of resources. As I understand, the 200 schools wouldn't be built this year, even though it was deferred, the first 50 was deferred. But then you ask a question. I mean, if you critically want to affect the fortunes of this economy, you've got to have your plans well ahead, not just plans, but costed as well. So there must be a business plan to whatever you have. This whole attempt of trying to smuggle in fresh ideas, which have cost implications, we've got to really watch it, because that's exactly what we are trying to do. We try to cut from here, and then before you realize, we are spiraling out of control.
Okay, so we'll have to go inside now. It is still the Graphic Fidelity Breakfast meeting taking place at the Ridge Arena here at the Alisa Hotel, Accra. And we've just been talking to Franklin Kudo, the Executive Director for Imani Ghana, and giving us his own thoughts. Actually, thoughts. They will always continue. The next couple of weeks also, they'll bring up new things they tend to find wrong or right in terms of policy, what has been done wrongly or rightly. But more importantly, let's go back to the dialogue.
As you do it for Ghana, Father, we acknowledge and say glory and honor and majesty unto your holy name. We thank and bless you. Father, we bless everybody gathered here and say, bless the Lord, O my soul. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Let everybody that is gathered here say, amen.
Please be seated. Thank you very much, Mr. John Tego. I wasn't told you were.
Just said Mr. John Tego. Apparently, you are a reverend minister too. Please put your hands together for him for that very powerful prayer. We now want to get acquainted with our chairman, and we want to invite the head of BCC at Fidelity Bank, AC Mills Robertson, to introduce our chairman for the day.
Good morning and welcome. distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our friends from the media, and to all our listeners live on air, good morning and welcome to the first quarterly graphic fidelity economic dialogue, the first of its kind in Ghana. The pleasure is mine to introduce to you our chairman for this august occasion. He is a member of the Order of Malta of Ghana, an economist and investment consultant of repute, both in Ghana and abroad. He worked as a civil servant and a public servant, and also as an economic research officer for the UN in New York. He was an acting principal secretary and an advisor of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. He helped structure the Social Security Fund under the State Insurance Corporation into what it is today, the Social Security and National Trust. A former chief executive of the Ghana Cocoa Marketing Board, our chairman attended Achimota School and is the current president of the Old Achimotans Association. He holds a BA, double honors, in economics and political science from the New Brunswick in Canada, and obtained an MA in economics from Yale. With his rich store of knowledge, he is one of the most sought-after business magnates of our time, serving on several corporate boards. He is the current chairman of the board of the Ghana International School, Airtel Communications Ghana, eTransact Limited, Bayport Financial Services, and Ghana Leasing. He is also a current member of the Board of Petroleum Commission and the UNDP Commission for Private Sector Development, and has participated in a number of good governance-related seminars, both locally and abroad. He is also the former chairman of the Public Utilities Regulatory Committee, UBA Ghana Limited, and the Oversight Implementation Committee for the Government of Ghana. He was the speaker for the 1998 James Kublenu Memorial Lectures on the theme, Ghana, the Land of Missed Opportunities. He also does not take his Christian duties lightly, and in 2002 received the apostolic blessing from His Holiness Pope John Paul II for meritorious service at the Golden Jubilee of the Christ the King Parish. He is married to his lovely wife, Cornelia, and is blessed with 3 children. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Kwame Pieni as the chairman of this special occasion, the first quarterly session of the Graphic Fidelity Economic Forum. Mr. Pieni, you are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished and honorable panelists, I recognize among them the Honorable Minister for Finance, honorable ministers, honorable members of Parliament, board members, management and staff of the Graphic Group of Companies and Fidelity Bank, organizers of this breakfast meeting, distinguished invited guests, distinguished members of the electronic and print media. And whilst we are talking about the print media, I think all of you want to join me in wishing the World Wide Web a happy birthday today. We don't know what we would have done without it. Let me first of all express my congratulations to the Graphic Group and Fidelity Group for this innovative idea of bringing together former ministers of finance of our nation, and I quote, to share their experiences on the state of the economy and make suggestions of ways to improve it. The objective is to, and I quote, seek answers to Ghana's current economic challenges. It is innovative because it seeks a non-partisan approach to tackling Ghana's current crisis. Some call it transitional problems. We have only one nation to make prosperous and safe for all of us. There's an Akan proverb which says, if you don't like your gums, your tongue is condemned to lick it. So let's make our gums sweet so that we stay here. I hope we can all rise to the challenge of putting Ghana first. His Excellency the President, in his State of the Nation address, said that this is not a time for anybody to stand on the sidelines. Ghana is a soccer-loving nation, and the sidelines, those on the sidelines are the best goal scorers. They can tell you should have shot with your left or right, but when you put them in the field, they can't even run after the ball. So I hope we can all, especially the ministers of finance, former, who are used to the Westminster parliamentary cut and thrust adversarial approach, that we can sober down and say what can we do to help Ghana in a non-partisan way. Let me also express my appreciation to the organizers for inviting me and honoring me to be the chairman for the occasion. I was told by a young, lovely lady that don't tell us to have a liberal economy. I think that Ghana is at a crossroads. The current turbulence, as the President put it, may force us to go to the old, tested, tried, and failed policies of the past. Economic protectionism, import substitution, which did not help. The solutions of the 20th century are no longer valid for the 21st century. Ghana has the opportunity to take advantage of the window open to us by some of the difficulties, challenges facing Nigeria, the natural market and destination for most investors. And Côte d'Ivoire are competitors, but they lack the English language and the Anglo-Saxon legal framework. But if we do not take the opportunity to create a liberal environment where people can move in and move out easily, we'll be condemned to a market of 25 million consumers, $30 billion purchasing power, or, according to the governor of the central bank, you quote it in cedis, 75 or 75.66. Cedi is depreciating, so I don't know where to put it. We can either do that or open up Ghana to become the aviation hub, the maritime hub, the financial services hub, the oil and gas engineering services hub, not only for West Africa, but for Africa, in the market of over 350 million of ECOWAS and almost 400 billion purchasing power. That's the choice for Ghana, but we need a liberal environment. I was hoping that given the presence of our ministers of finance, we would have focused on the macroeconomic environment, because without a stable, relatively stable, credible, predictable, and sustainable macroeconomic environment, we cannot do most of the things that we need to do. We need to be able to attract foreign direct investment for our infrastructure, the type of engineered financial structures that go in to build the infrastructure for us, build, operate, and own, build, operate, and transfer, will not come in if you don't have a relatively stable currency and a policy environment. Without that, a lot of the things that we want to do, technology, inflows, may not take place. The African Center for Economic Transformation just launched their book, Growth with Depth, in Johannesburg. And they are hoping to launch it in Ghana in the next 2 months. The book is on the web, and I encourage everybody to go and read it. It says what Africa needs is not just growth, but growth with depth, through transformation. The African Union is talking about transformation. The Secretary General's panel, high-level panel of the economy after 2015 is talking about transformation. What is transformation? An asset defines it as making sure that all sectors of the economy are infused with technology, increase productivity on our farms, in our firms, in our government offices. Technology, continuous inflow will not happen without foreign direct investment. And that will not happen if the macroeconomic environment is not stable. I'm going to be listening very carefully to our ministers for finance. And I'm hoping that they will bring their insights into how do we remove the structural fiscal imbalances that have been at the base, at the source of the macroeconomic instability. How do we end the cycle of election-related over-expenditures that always undermine macroeconomic stability that would have been built at the sacrifices of all of us? How can we make our state supportive and a promoter of wealth creation instead of wealth destruction? If you were the managing director of a foreign-owned company in Ghana, and you believed in the economy, and therefore retained your earnings, equivalent to about $45 million equivalent last year, you are now faced with having to explain to them how you lost $20 million of that. If we don't have if we lose sight of the confidence dimension of the stable macroeconomic environment equation, we are going to put pressures on the city because everybody who makes a profit will want to transfer it out. And the president guaranteed that companies, don't worry, your dividends can be repatriated. There will be no retained earnings. We need to make sure for a small economy, and that's the dilemma I want our ministers to help us to resolve. How do we create a macroeconomic environment so that Ghana can take its rightful place as the hub of West Africa? We have no choice. You cannot do import substitution and protectionism in Ghana and expect Nigeria to open their markets to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sit down quietly and listen to the ministers, but I hope the organizers will help by letting us focus on how we restore macroeconomic stability, policy, environment stability, relative predictability so that business people can invest, and so that we can have attract the resources and the technology that we need so badly to move our economy going. And I thank you for the honor of making me the chairman, and I wish all of us a productive deliberation as Ghanaians on the side of Ghana. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwame Pienim. And with that, we welcome listeners of City 97.3 to the Graphic Fidelity Economic Dialogue, which is coming to you live from Alisa Hotel. You just heard from Mr. Kwame Pienim, who's our chairman. We want to hear from the organizing partners, and we're very privileged to have here the chief executive or the managing director of the bank that is behind this. Most of you would not know this, but this bank is the second largest indigenous bank and the 6th largest bank in Ghana. And you wouldn't know that if you looked at them, but they are quite big. Our next speaker is Mr. Edward Efa. He is the founder of the Fidelity Group and has been its chief executive since inception in 1998. He has over 2 decades of experience as a senior finance executive. Previous positions held include Resident Director of Global Emerging Markets Ghana Limited, Group Risk Manager for Rudolph Wolf, the City of London-based derivative and foreign exchange trader, and a management consultant and audit manager with Coopers and Lybrand in London. He has other directorships: Jacana Partners, Takrady International Company, Member of Council, University of Ghana, Chairman, College of Health Sciences, and African Capital Limited. Edward Efa is a chartered accountant by profession and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Edward Efa to bring us some remarks.
Distinguished panelists, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mr. Tekpe, the former Finance and Economic Planning Minister, Honorable Akoto Osei, Mr. Moses Asaga, the Managing Director of Graphic Corporation, fellow Chief Executives of banks and businesses, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Would like to say a very big thank you for honoring our invitation to join us this morning, in spite of your very busy schedules, to dialogue on the state of the Ghanaian economy. The dialogue will be a quarterly event, and we pledge Fidelity's readiness to support the program through its existence. We believe in Ghana, and the stability of the economy and the development of the economy affects all of us and is very key to our business. Consequently, we decided to support this series. And as much as possible, those of us from the business sector, we want to see non-partisanship. We want to see stable macroeconomy. We want to see growth. We want to see depth in the economy. And sometimes we see too much NPP, NDC in everything. And therefore, we thought we'd bring different ministers from the different parties to come here in dialogue and to work with them so that we can make some progress on this front. I'd like to say, from the point of view of somebody running a business with 500,000 customers, we see how all our customers are concerned about the economy, whether they're NPP or NDC. We have 2,000 employees. Some of them are NPP, some of them are NDC. They all are affected by the economy, and when it comes to the way the economy is going, we don't see any differentiation. In the last month, we've spent a significant amount of our time explaining to our customers the new Bank of Ghana foreign exchange rules. We just completed a roadshow to raise significant capital for the bank, and I'm happy to say we'll raise about $130 million in capital for the bank. And I was surprised. More than perhaps 80% of my time was dedicated in talking to investors about the economy of Ghana than about the bank itself and its plans. So the economy is so central to everything we're doing, and we also see that there is a bit of there's a huge gap from where we sit between the business community and the politicians on the level of confidence, on concerns about the economy, on taxation policy and issues, on the deficit, on fiscal policy, on depreciation. And we thought this dialogue would help bring the business community and the politicians together so that we can share ideas, we can share frustrations, and we can leave with more confidence, because without confidence in the economy, we'll see more unemployment, we'll see many more problems and challenges. All around the world, many countries' economies, including ours, is facing one form of challenge or the other. And as stakeholders, the onus is on us to provide platforms like this to bring experts together, economists together, to dialogue as often as possible and proffer solutions. We would therefore like to say a very big thank you once again to the panelists for their time and to all of you for being here with us today. And we hope you'll find this dialogue very useful and we'll all leave better off about the state of the economy and how we run our businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Big thank you to Chief Executive Edward. Please put your hands together for him again. And with that, we welcome our viewers on multi-TV as well. So the stakes have been heightened. We are live on radio, we are live on television. I'm sure very soon they will announce we are live on the internet as well. We want to finally, before the program officially starts, hear from the other partner, who is the Chief Executive for Graphic Communications Group. He's an engineer by training, started out as an engineer, and then he joined the multimedia group as a Chief Technology Officer. He eventually became the General Manager for Joy FM, Managing Director for OMP, which is a television-based media network, and then he subsequently became the COO of Multi-TV. With this new position as Graphic, he is one of the few media CEOs to have done what we call 360. He's gone through the whole raft, and it is my pleasure to call up Mr. Ken Ashibe to come and bring us quick remarks. Please put your hands together for Ken.
Thank you, Bernard. Mr. Chairman, Minister for Finance, former Ministers of Finance, Managing Director for Fidelity, Edward, the Board Chairperson, Graphic Communications Group, members of the Board, CEOs and invited guests, you're welcome to today's Graphic and Fidelity Dialogue Series. As has been said earlier on, this is something we plan to do every quarter. It's something that is geared at the development of our country, Ghana. For us in Graphic, we believe that as members of the media, we just should not report the news. We just should not uncover, but we should be agents of change. We should be active agents of change. And by the mandate given to us by the Constitution, we should even extend it beyond just government to all of us in leadership, holding us to account. How do we transform our country, Ghana? How do we move to the next level? It is important that we all realize that we are together in this boat as one people who would be responsible for changing our fortunes. Yes, our friends, the foreign investors would come and support us, but the transformation of this country would only happen when we ourselves take the height of leadership of every industry and transform our economy. People will come and leave when the fundamentals are not right. But for me and you, Ghanaians, when even the fundamentals are not right, there's nowhere to go to, and we would need to ensure that change happens. It's the reason I'm happy that in our partnership, we're partnering with Fidelity, which is an indigenous bank, because in crafting these solutions for Ghana, Ghanaians should lead it and others would come and help us. And that's what basically we are here to do. We're also hoping that with this series, we'll be able to forge the unity that we require to be able to transform this nation. There's no first thing, there's no group of people who've developed with only half of their brains. There's no group of people who developed with only half of the people that are in the country. So it's important that we all come together as Ghanaians, because the CD does not know your political color when you go to spend it. We all need to come together. So we're hoping that with this forum, we are bringing together our political leaders to come and speak solutions that are for Ghana. The elections are over, now we need to rule. So what we want to do is to ensure that what are the challenges that are facing us? What are the issues that we have to deal with? And how do we as a people come together and help push this forward? We're hoping that from this, we will not just be talking, but we would have some concrete ideas that as part of the media, we would be able to follow up. And that's the challenge I will throw to not just the graphic staff, but also all media who are here, our partners from CTFM and also Multi-TV, and then the rest of the media who are here. We need to be able to follow these issues. We are fond of raising the issues 1 week, it's in the media, everybody's talking about it, and we go to sleep while the problems fester. So it's important that out of this, we pick about 5 issues and follow through to see that there's some change happening. We want to thank all our panelists, the chairperson, and everybody who's been here, that this is the beginning of something that we're hoping would help transform our country, Ghana. And then you are all also welcome to this session. Thank you all, and I hope you have a good morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Shigbe. Now, we want to proceed with the program proper, and with the tone that was set with the introduction of Mr. Kwame Pianim, I'm going to run quickly through brief profiles of our key speakers. Then we would give the finance minister the opportunity to further give us a context. So he would give us a 5-minute assessment of the true state of the Ghanaian economy. The plan would then be to have the other finance ministers also give their own quick assessment of the situation. After that, we'll take our seats here to have a conversation. And within that conversation, we would involve you with your own questions and your thoughts. We have decided to divide this into 2 parts. The first part will be assessing where we are now. But as both Mr. Effa and Mr. Kenashibe said, this is more about the future. So the second part will be where we are going with cocoa, where we are going with industrialization, where we are going with gold, so that we have something that will be common ground for all of us. So that's really how we intend to proceed. And I want to quickly run through, I'm not going to go through all their profiles because you know who they are, but just to read quickly some of the things you may not know about our finance minister. He was born in Somanya in the eastern region. He started his education in a cluster of schools. He first obtained his degree in BCom, or Bachelor of Commerce, from the University of Cape Coast. He's a chartered accountant and holds an MPA from the Kennedy School in Harvard. As Deputy Minister of Finance from March 2009 to 2013, he worked mainly on the budget and medium-term expenditure framework, as well as on revenue policy and administration. He is a member of the Board of Directors of the Bank of Ghana and chaired the Joint Steering Committee of the GRA and GIFMIS. And between 1999 and 2009, Mr. Tekbe held various positions, last as senior economist in the Fiscal Affairs Division of the IMF. And to cut a long story short, Mr. Setekbe is now our finance minister. Mind you, he's published on VAT Handbook by Thomson Reuters in 2011, and continues to maintain a keen interest in research, publications, reviews, and teachings. I want us to put our hands together for him. He will be the first speaker, but just to put all of this in context, so let me just bring you quick introductions of our other 2 finance ministers. Dr. Anthony Akoto-Osei is a member of parliament. He served as Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. His professional career in Ghana began as a research fellow for the Center for Policy Analysis, an independent economic think tank in Accra. An economist by profession, Dr. Akoto-Osei's expertise lies in monetary economics, international economics and quantitative economics. He has taught as assistant and associate prof of economics at Delali University, New Orleans, lecturer in the Department of Economics at Howard, where incidentally he obtained his PhD. His MA in applied economics was from the American University. He has a number of publications to his credit, including The Demand for Heating Fuels, a disaggregated modeling approach with Rodney Green et al. Other publications include The Effects of Different Types of Income on Age, Sex, Race, Specific Mortality Rates in the US. This is to give you a sense of who he is. He presently is a minority spokesperson on finance, and he will be speaking as well. A round of applause for Dr. Anthony Akutosek. We're also privileged to have the Honorable Moses Asaga, who served as a long-time MP for NAPDAM for many years. He is presently in charge of the National Petroleum Authority. Mr. Asaga served on a number of parliamentary committees, the Select Committee for Finance and Economic Planning, Mines and Energy and Special Budgets. He was Minister for Employment in his past life. He was also a Deputy Minister of Finance and Economic Planning between 1997 and 2000 in both the private and public industries respectively. His career began in 1987 as a staff engineer on North Sea oil reservoirs at Occidental Petroleum in Aberdeen, Scotland. From 1988 to 1990, he worked as an industrial analyst and as an economic analyst for Daishin Investment and Securities and joined EcoBank as an investment analyst. 4 years later, he worked with the GMPC as well before entering politics. He attended the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where he has a BSc in Industrial Chemistry, holds a master's degree in Petroleum Engineering from Aberdeen, an MBA in Finance from Yonsei Business School at Yonsei, Seoul, and at the time this profile was written, was a candidate for PhD in Financial Economics at Durham. I believe you update us on that PhD when it comes to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, Moses Asaga. We were expecting Honorable Yao Safo Mafo, but he is unavoidably absent because of travel arrangements. And so he sent his apologies. But we believe Mr. Kwame Pionim, being chairman, will be an active chairman, and he will be going off target. And lay a foundation for us before we start our conversation. Please put your hands together for Honorable Sir Tepe, Minister for Finance. Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Colleague panelists, former ministers, chief executives, and representatives of senior officials from the public service, media, ladies and gentlemen. I'm required to set the context for these discussions. And the chairman has stressed the importance of the macro economy for doing business. I would do that, but also position my introductory remarks in the context of where Ghana is today and where Ghana should be or is expected to be going forward. The first thing we need to notice, Ghana has become a middle-income country. I've said, why do we have to bring this to ourselves? Why the rush? And I usually have two responses. That if you went by one development plan, we should be achieving income status next year, 2015. And if you went by another one, we should be achieving middle income status by 2020. So which is 5 years away. So this is something which we had set for ourselves. It just happens that we woke up one fine morning after rebasing and we became a lower middle income country. Then we started commercial exports of oil and gas. We did a population census, and being middle income is nothing more than your per capita income being more than $1,000. The population increase did not upset the output, and therefore we got entrenched as a lower middle income country. The reality is dawning on us. The reality sorry about that. The reality, let me just give two examples. That Ghana is no longer eligible to borrow and repay over 40 years from the World Bank. Ghana is no longer eligible, similarly, to borrow from the African Development Bank for that duration. Ghana can only borrow and repay over 25 years. And if the trajectory going forward for oil and gas, the expansion of the services sector, and what we want to do with agriculture comes to be realized, Ghana is likely to be in a mix of IBRD window according to the World Bank, where we will be accessing all the commercial, facilities. So that is the first, context which I think is important that we bear in mind, and this is a context in which we say Ghana is a country in transition, and therefore I would admonish all of you to acknowledge that fact. It is a mathematical division of our GDP divided by our population, and the world will continue to judge us at that from now on. It is up to us to get the policies right to move it forward. There's no point in regretting that position. The second point, which is very important, is that we are a country that has faced volatilities in the past. We all know what it means for the Kosomo Dam, the reservoir to drop below a certain level. We also know what it means for our gold and cocoa prices, in the international market to drop. But lately, that volatility is often affected positively and negatively. Negatively first by our exposure to the capital markets, because whether it is government or whether it is business, Ghana has an exposure to these international markets now. We have a lot of international firms that are operating in the country. We source most of our long-term capital from the capital markets, and therefore it is, as the chairman said, a regime in which capital flows in and out, a regime in which we become what we desire for ourselves, an investment destination, also makes it important that we become aware of these impacts that would continue to have on the economy. But even as we, including government, have this exposure, including our domestic bonds that are patronized by non-residents, and our second foray into sovereign bond issues after 2007, that also is another exposure. Ghana is on the periphery and is considered as such of the emerging markets. And therefore, sometimes when we analyze what is happening domestically, yes, it is important that within our history, devaluation is a very important thing and a very thorny issue. The value of the cedi is a very thorny issue from our political economic perspective. But we should also recognize that these volatilities, which we should learn to manage, and that is my second proposition going forward, to manage effectively with superior instruments that the Bank of Ghana does, like the swap and other arrangements, are the way forward for us. If we do not manage these volatilities well, then we would continue to have this sort of shock, that's affecting the economy. I believe that we are getting better at it. And we must also develop our gas, particularly with respect to power, because we now know that a breach of a pipeline from Nigeria could have very adverse effects, on us. And in our typical Ghanaian humor, we come up with terms like dumso, which for the economy is very important because it leads to reduced output. So these are the two contexts. There are other contexts, but I'd like to show the transition context and the context of volatilities which we need to measure. How do we therefore move on these issues? First of all, the economy must continue with this value addition, such as processing of our raw materials. And this is the extent to which I believe the initiative in the processing of gas, which would power the economy, but also lower the price of power possibly and encourage industrialization and business, is the way to go. Value addition in the areas of agriculture, as we are doing with cocoa and in other, are the way forward for us. This is the only way to maintain a diversified economy. The chairman has already alluded to the services sector, which is important. Few people who refer to Ghana as a natural resource country know that the service sector is actually the largest of our GDP, of about 50%. And I do subscribe to the view of the chairman that we should create Ghana, we should create Accra as a hub for transportation, a hub for financial services, and a hub for anything, for which international investment capital and domestic capital, would find a way. Then, Mr. Chairman, I wish to also, before I take my seat, mention two issues. What is the role of government? I think sometimes the expectation from even the private sector about what government is capable of doing is very much exaggerated. I say this because the government takes our taxes and we complain about taxes, and therefore if we do not want taxes to increase, then government must play a minimalist role, a facilitating role. Because GRA brings in barely 12 to 13 billion, and that's all we have to pay public servants. That's what we have to get the machinery of government and social intervention going, and that is what government has to invest in infrastructure. You will agree with me that this is not a big sum of money, and therefore when expectations are high, not just from those who deservedly so would want it through social intervention programs, particularly in education and health. But we have a private sector that seems to think that government will be able to provide, for example, its capital needs, or government should set up, various institutions and others to move it forward. I say that this, given our output and given our desire to maintain, using the word again, a liberal tax regime that has benefited at a corporate tax rate of say 25%, 22.5%, and we are no longer imposing sales and other taxes at 200%, then it means that this is the nexus which is very important. The private sector has to do more. And that leads to my second point, which is that both government and the private sector has been on the short end of the market for too long. Treasury bills, we all know, are very popular. And until we started going into 3-year and 5-year bonds and the sovereign bond, the most reliable source of financing for the budget was treasury bills, which have high interest rates. And as we all know, I do not belabor the point, crowding out effects and high interest rates. What it means is that government itself should begin to look for a deeper source of financing, particularly for the capital budget. But that is also the case, with the private sector. I believe the private sector is also depending a lot on the short end of the market. In forging ahead, we should be thinking about a development bank, not necessarily state-owned, but this is a challenge for the financial sector, a bank that is deep enough to go into areas like long-term financing of mortgages and others in the country. We do not have that, yet. or even if we have it, it's not deep enough. Ghana should be thinking about, for example, an EXIM approach, because that is the only way we can also boost exports in order that our current account situation in the long term, will be brought under control, and the volatilities that come, with the currency. There is a statistic that says less than 2% of insurance, offshore or onshore, are by domestic firms. There's a context in which, even though we welcome the AIGs and prudentials of this world to join us and to invest, there's a context in which insurance is very important for the private sector, as well as even for government, which often has to issue sovereign guarantees for even projects that can be self-financing and which can be implemented on the back of insurance, instruments. We need to do other things, and I cannot go through all the points, but for example, we need a stock exchange. We often view the stock exchange too much in terms of equity capital. We need a stock exchange that will lead us to corporate bonds, that will partner with international, other stock exchanges that have deeper, awareness, and within the West African environment to provide that long-term finance, both equity and bonds, in order that we can move. We need to build institutions such as for the private sector equivalent, as is being attempted with smallholder schemes. And the chairman has both experiences, and that we know that Cocoa Board is nothing more than an aggregator for peasant farmers who led this country to become first leading producer of cocoa and now second with the quality. The assurance they have is Cocoa Board is an off-taker, and Cocoa Board and its agencies, part of which is now privatized. We need to do that for the private sector to come in with warehousing and other schemes to develop after government has put in, say, irrigation schemes to build an offtake so that the irrigation schemes do not break down again. We need offtakes from warehousing to agro-processing to exports. In essence, what I'm saying is to agree with President Obama when he admonished us that we do not only need leaders, but we also need institutions. Because it is when we have the financial institutions, it's when we have a deep enough market going forward that we will be able to realize our dreams for the real sector, whether it's petrochemical, whether it's agri, whether it is gas, or whether it is turning Ghana into services hub. The real sector, as we know in the economic loop, has to be serviced by a deep enough financial market. And I'm suggesting that that financial market cannot be on the backs of only governments, which has tax revenues of only 12 to 13 billion, which I believe there are institutions here with turnovers that probably are larger. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I think that the nation ought to also continue with its Millennium Development Goal aspirations. Otherwise, we would become a rich country, whether by accident or by design, but leave a large sector of the population behind. And we know what that means. We should be an economy which grows its financial sector, its real sector, and create jobs so that the graduates that we are we are producing in this country, both private and public universities, will find jobs. It is important, therefore, that the nexus, for me going forward, the nexus between the real sector and what happens, the financial sector that will oil it, are key to that macroeconomic stability that we desire. Because the instability comes with a limited operation, it comes with exposure. But I think that we can begin to look, forward in a management of the economy that can assure that stability, that will help boost Ghana's credentials in democracy, Ghana's credentials in cohesion. And that is in one way. It is in inclusive growth. That is the way Ghana is considered today. When we did our roadshow, the appreciation for Ghana is that it has inclusive growth. And that's because the economy is growing, but we're also making progress on the MDG goals. But we have to remind ourselves that even when we become a lower middle income country, There's one thing I've learned from the Chinese. Anytime you meet a Chinese minister and you refer to China being the second largest economy, they will tell you that we have a large section of our population which is also poor, and therefore we are still a developing country. That is the modesty for development, but that is also what we need to develop in terms of growth that would bring along, through social intervention, those who need to come along in order that we can benefit from a shared growth. Thank you very much. I'll take my seat and hope to pass.
Thank you very much. I want to ask Mr. Tepe to take a seat in our very comfortable, and ask Mr. Saga, Dr. Kochose, Mr. Kwame Penim, all of you please come and take your seats up there. And then we will take, Dr. Kochose says, Mr. Chairman is giving him 10 minutes. So, Minister has 15 minutes, you have 10 minutes. This is the constraint Chairman has placed on you. Please put your hands together for Dr. Anthony Kochose.
I thought that if we want to think Ghana, then we will be equal, 15-15. But that's notwithstanding. First, I want to put on record that this conversation did not start here. Seth and I are good friends, so is Asaga. We've started this conversation a long time ago. Right now, I'm putting myself as if I was sitting in the Ministry of Finance with Honorable Hackman and Alan looking for money. And let's accept the fact that the fundamentals of the economy are not sound. I think there's no dispute about it. Inflation, we know where it's going. 2 years in a row, the budget deficit has been double digits. That's a fact. The current account deficit has been double digits. That's a fact. The last 2 months, we've experienced 12% of depreciation. You businesses know better than us what is happening. That's a fact. What shocked me most was the release by Ghana Statistical Services, confirmed by the IMF, that growth, which was projected at 7.4, now is likely to be below 6%. That's a fact. What it means is that the government, from where I sit, must come up with a new budget. Why do I say that? Because the budget that was presented in December does not sufficiently address the deficit issue. Already, the budget projected a 10.2% deficit. My own numbers give otherwise. But let me accept, for the purpose of this discussion, the estimate put out by the IMF, since they are not political. They have put it at 10.8. The president mentioned 12% in the State of the Nation address. I think he's gone too far. Let's assume it's about 11. What Ghanaians and the international community is looking for is credibility in reduction in deficit, a signal from 11% to 8.5. How do you do it? If I was sitting in the Ministry of Finance, I would be shivering, because it means that I must find 2.6 billion cedis in savings. That's a fact. Where does it come from? There are only two sides: revenue, expenditure. If you look at the growth numbers, 7.4 to less than 6, it means that revenue cannot be robust, isn't it? Already, we are told by the GRA that they missed their target by 16%. So I cannot count on income taxes and so forth to fill the gap. VAT has gone up. Fees and levies have gone up. I would be surprised if the government would be bold enough to come up with a new tax measure. So I'll put that off the table. How much can you get from tax administration? Maybe if you crack the whip, GRA, customs can come up with some 200 to 300 million. But keep in mind, I'm thinking 2.6 billion in cuts. So if I were sitting in the Ministry of Finance, I will tell the president that I don't think we can raise a lot of money. If it comes, bingo, it will help us. So let's go to expenditure. Where do we cut? This, the minister must look for savings, whether he likes it or not. We are going from 11% to 8.5. What are the sources of expenditure? I'll come to the most difficult one later. That's the wage bill. Let me take the easiest. Use of goods and services. They call it administration, whatever it is. 1.4 billion for the whole public sector. How much can he cut? Last year, we know that most of the MDAs did not get the money. 1.4 billion, let's say he can cut 200 million. Find savings there. The other one is domestic capital expenditure. It's not enough anyway, 1.5 billion. That would affect growth, yes, but that is the situation you have. That's another, let's say 200 million. I'm being very generous. Because I think that if you cut too much, you cannot grow that much. But let's say you find another 200 million. So you're at 400. Now, let's go to the difficult ones. Statutory funds, by law, you cannot cut them. As we speak, they are arrears to the tune maybe between 800 to 1 billion. So the first job is to pay these arrears and then pay the current ones. So I don't think by law, and if it does, Parliament will take him on anyway. Because now we cannot accumulate arrears in debt fund, DACF, National Health Insurance. They are affecting development in the districts. So that one is off the table. What do we have left? Interest payments and wage expenditure. There's another one which I'll come to, maybe he can negotiate. And I think he should negotiate. That's the arrears that have accumulated. Not the statutory ones, because by law he cannot go there. He tells us in the budget about 1 billion is owed to contractors. The total is 2.5, but about 1.5 is on statutory, so that cannot be negotiated by law. So 1 billion to the contractors. He must sit down with them and say, look, I cannot pay all of it this year, but I'll give you a credible payment plan for the next 2 or 3 years. That is credible, and it will be payable when it is due. Not that when it is due, it is not paid. I think if I were him, I'll start talking to the contractors all over. At least something will be paid at a later date, maybe 2 or 3 years. Now, interest payment. Unfortunately, the depreciation will push external payments up. The budget assumed a 2.2%, 2.2 average depreciation, CD, the dollar exchange rate. Like yesterday, my bank gave me 2.6. I don't know about your banks, but certainly that assumption in the budget is out of the water. We cannot work with it. I don't know what forecast they are going to do for the end of the year. Even if you assume 2.6, it means that external interest payments will go higher. So you need more money there. There's no savings. Current interest rates, if Bank of Ghana does not change its monetary policy stance, means that new debt will come at the higher interest rate. So I'm assuming that interest payments will go higher. So that one is not a savings. So what is left? Wage bill. Everybody knows that our current wage bill is not sustainable, but we don't want to talk about it. First of all, Mr. Minister, I think that we should defer full implementation of single spine now, not later. The other components that have not started must be deferred but negotiated. On the 2 and 3 category allowances, those parts cannot be sustained in the next 2 or 3 terms. Second, there are arrears on the wage bill, even with the first part of implementation. The minister should sit down with Labour seriously and tell them that I cannot pay it all. If I pay it all, something must give. So that must also be negotiated. Because now we are looking for almost 2 billion of savings in that area. 2 billion. It's not easy. Currently, it's at 10 if you add social security and pensions and gratuities. Those arrears must be negotiated in a longer term, not this year. The budget cannot contain it. Then the most important thing, I'm sure Seth wouldn't want to say it, but some negotiations for retrenchment must begin now. I know government is in discussions with Labour. That wage bill cannot be sustained. Almost 9 billion just on wages. It cannot be sustained. Some negotiation, but it must be credible. If I were the president, I would signal that every ministry must show me 20% of retrenchment in 2015 and 2016. Maybe this year you can't, because this year is almost contractual. But you cannot pay all that you are owing. It's simple like that. Revenue doesn't exist. Otherwise, they bring more taxes. I think politically that would be too challenging. So your only route is that huge wage animal, which we all agree is not sustainable. But you cannot negotiate. For example, if you say that inflation is at 14%, you cannot negotiate a minimum wage that is 20%. It won't hold. This was done 3-4 years in a row. If you believe that your inflation target is 9%, you keep it at that. I think these are going to be tough negotiations. Because I'm thinking that if the minister doesn't do it, the deficit issue cannot come down and we will not be perceived as credible. I think all of us read the assessment of the IMF, not myself. And I think we cannot help but deal with it. And dealing with it, Mr. Minister, is expenditure, whether you want to call it rationalization, I call it cuts, negotiated for the medium term so that the pressure goes down. Now, if we're able to do it, and even if we don't get 8.5, but we get 9, I think there will be credibility. So in the next 2 or 3 months, I'm expecting that the minister and his team will be kept in a cold room with these answers so that when they come to Parliament, we can support it. We will support it because Ghana's credibility in terms of deficit reduction for the past 2 years is at stake. We cannot pretend that we can dodge it. And the sooner we do it now, I said the next 2 or 3 months, because Parliament will rise in a month. It will take the people some months to get the numbers, but the numbers don't look good. If I go to the business side, the mining sector is laying off, and Signals is continuing to lay off. If you look at the oil sector, from what we are hearing, we are having challenges. So industry, I don't expect much growth. The public sector expenditure must come down in a credible way to bring the deficit to 8.5 that government was. I thank you very much.
Thank you. This is the exchange. Thank you very much, Dr. Antonia Kotose. We want to now bring Moses Asaga to now bring his thoughts on the economy. 10 minutes. Put your hands together for Honorable Asaga.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that Dr. Kotose has just read a new budget and what he will be doing. And, but I wanted to say that he talked about the deficit, and I was very happy he really went deep into deficit. But I believe that the fact that there is even a deficit which is at 11%, and we know also in our economic theory and finance that you can have deficit financing, which is sometimes acceptable. It is just the levels. And I don't think that an 11-point-something% deficit financing is out of the way, especially if you can prove that that deficit financing was used in productive ventures and not just for, let's say, paying of salaries. So let's look at what was this deficit used for. We all agree that we have a rural economy. We need rural infrastructure. You go into Ghana, to the most remote places, and at least rural electrification can be felt in those areas. Mr. Chairman, if you look at water and sanitation, and especially where I come from in the north, you go to most parts of the towns and villages in the north, and there are borehole drilling all over to provide potable water. This is where the deficit financing comes into being. You look at infrastructure in our educational institutions, we have never had that since after Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. We don't need to go far. Sometimes when I pass by Accra Polytechnic, I feel like, what? These are the hostels they have? And like the president has been saying, you need to travel to see the kind of infrastructure that we have given to our secondary schools. Even in remote Navrongo, at a village called Congo, if you go and see their girls' secondary school infrastructure, it will amaze you. Wesley girls will really have to fight hard to compete in terms of infrastructure. So the deficit financing may have its negatives when you are talking of macroeconomics and numbers. But again, it fits in other productive sectors. For example, if you look at road construction, the government has been trying to use some of the deficit financing for road construction. So I just wanted to allay your fears that the deficit was not just meant for recurrent, but it went into infrastructure. But I do agree with him that now that we have done part of the infrastructure, maybe the minister should now start looking at how to recover and then meet the supposed targets of the IMF for what they want it for. I think that when we are talking of the middle income status, which is now a lower middle income, it is real. Because what is the definition of middle income? And even in terms of our lives, I believe that the socio-economic strata talks of a lower income group, it talks of a middle income group, and an upper income group. And it is the middle income group that moves an economy, because the rural economy is only for, it's just to sustain the people there. But it is the middle income economy that drives the economy. And have we attained it? I would say yes. Let's take the banking sector. I think every bank in Ghana this year recorded profitability. That is a measure of a growing economy. That is a measure of an active economy. And even for Ghana Commercial Bank, our figures are yet to come out. You'll be amazed what they have achieved in terms of profitability this year. Now, I remember about 8 years ago, when Honorable Alan Chirementin was the Minister for Trade and Industry, there was a comment from the IMF and the World Bank that if you want to know that Ghana is really developing, you should look at the construction sector, the skyscrapers, and the manifolds that are going on. I'm sure we are seeing it in great limbs. Everybody can see the airport city. Everybody can see the real estate development in this country. These are all measures of the fact that the service sector is doing very well, and this is because the investment climate in Ghana is very conducive. You go out of Ghana and you are being told that the best destination for investment in West Africa, they prefer Ghana because of stability, politically, security. But we must spend money for security. So if we have spent money for security to create a deficit, I think that at least we are also in the right direction. Mr. Chairman, when I was Minister for Employment, I used to travel to Kumasi. When I was in Parliament as a minority chairman for finance, I used to travel to Kumasi. These days, you travel to Kumasi from Accra and all the planes are full of businessmen. And the frequency of flights have increased. If the business sector is not doing well, you wouldn't have that. Today, as we sit in the aviation industry, we have about 17 airlines flying to Accra, to the extent that British Airways, which used to fly only one flight a day, is now flying 2 flights and is filled up. And as for business class, you can't get it. These are all evidence and the signs of the fact that the economy at least is not sleeping as others are thinking about. And then if you come to the oil and gas sector, when did we ever fathom that we could have companies like ENI in Ghana developing gas and oil? When did we fathom that we can have Look Oil, the 3rd largest oil company in Russia, being in Ghana? If you tally all this, including Schlumberger, including Baker Hughes, the kind of investment that they are bringing into this country is in billions of dollars. So I just want to say that before we go into questions and answers, I think the future is bright for Ghana, despite some of the macroeconomic indices that have been distorted of late. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A big round of applause for all our speakers. Thank you very much indeed. Let's not forget that we're live on City 97.3 FM and on Multi TV, and we have a good round, Mr. Chairman, to take quick comments. I think the deficits have come up for mention. It will be useful to explore that briefly, because Dr. Kutosa is quite worried about the deficit and even says that Mr. Setekwe must do some big cuts. I believe it will be important now to talk briefly about the deficit. And so maybe, Mr. Finance Minister, are you as worried about the deficit as it appears on the second presentation? And can you assure our listeners and everybody here that you do have it under control and that your plan for managing the deficit is in line with what we all expect? So you don't have to come up, just sit where you are and make some quick comments, because the coming up will be please sit down and just talk on the deficit question. Yes. So cameraman, you want to now focus your attention there? Yes. Let me just fix the mic. So all of you, I have given mics to you. You don't need to come up. We'll just make sure.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And there's no denying, that the deficit is an issue. But I wish to make 2 points on this. Ghana has experienced deficits in the past. And we have been disciplined as a country over the last 30 years to always bring it down. The issue is what I pointed out in my introductory remarks, managing volatilities that lead to this. And then also there is a policy element to this, which is my second point. The deficit is something which the government highlighted in the 2013 budget. And in that budget, we did something for the first time. The overrun was 6%. Because the deficit was supposed to be 6%. We ended up at 12 or 11 points. If you take we itemized the causes of the overrun, because that gives you the opportunity to address the causes of the overrun. Single spine, which is a policy related to our ability to rationalize public service pay, as the president joked in his rice water comment in WHO, is something that has dogged us for a very long time. That was the first major overrun. The second overrun was petroleum corporate income tax as a result of the shortfall in the outputs in 2012. Last year, the situation was reserved, so we are no longer having deficits on the revenue side. In fact, the shortfall from mining last year was filled by the positive variance that we had on petroleum, because we are currently producing 110,000 barrels per day average compared to the 85,000 barrels or less that led to that shortfall. There was a subsidy, and we know the history of subsidy. There was a general consensus 2 years ago that it would be better for the country, in order to keep the subsidy under control, to take more measured increases in utility and petroleum prices. That is the automatic adjustment that is being done, which is incidentally, since every economic measure has some cost, led to the increase in inflation, which we had also partly to the increase in inflation, which we are also seeing. The other factor, 2 factors on the revenue side, which we quantified, was the shortfall by GRA, which was a result of low output. You are business, most of you are businessmen here. When the Nigerian gas was breached, power was affected, output was affected. Gold and cocoa prices fell. It also affected the ability of the economy. Unless we wish that these are events that would continue occurring, and some of them have stabilized and some are changing, then I wish to state that, again, this is rooted in volatilities, which are not always on the downside. The other revenue, which we quantified, was the grants which we didn't get from our donors, which was it. So we quantified the 6 items and we have been tackling them. So I wish to assure, my good friend, and the audience here that in the 2014, we tracked these items. We made progress on subsidy. As I said, petroleum was reversed. I take the points that the ranking member made because most of them, and they are on our website, were covered at the whole forum with respect to the service fund. The fact that we must, look at budgetary constraints, the fact that we must begin to take a multi-year approach to the way we handle public sector, wage bill, the fact that we must look at the productivity end, and indeed the issue of productivity, which, yes, I can mention the word, because you can have voluntary deployment. There are people who are close to retirement, for example, who may want to take a package, and go. There are those who may want to take opportunities, and, so these are all issues which are being addressed, not just by government, by the committee that was agreed in the whole forum, which is chaired by my colleague minister, for employment. As for a new budget, I think we should be cognizant of the fact that Ghana has sufficient processes and institutions. And our Financial Administration Act, as well as the Constitution, requires that the Minister of Finance at the appropriate time should go to Parliament if he or she thinks that there will be an imbalance before the end of the year, or if he or she thinks that there will be revenue sources which were not appropriated. It's still early. This is the first time the country has gone through this volatility. As I keep saying, there's a seasonal element to it also. Coming out of the dry season, coming out of the cocoa season, these are volatilities. It's also only worsened by our exposure. And so I don't think that, rushing to Parliament, with measures would be helpful at this stage. We have 10 more months to go. We normally do media review. Last year, because of parliamentary calendar, we didn't do. And we have, as a nation, come to accept that the media review and a possible supplementary budget is the time to address, any changes in the budget that was presented. The budget was presented in November with projections to the end of the year. And let me make one correction. The IMF did not endorse the Ghana Statistical Service figures. What the IMF is saying is that, and which is work that we are also doing, we do respect the Statistical Service, is that if you take the 0.3% growth, it is a complete outlier. You can go back to the last 8 to 10 years when the economy has been growing from the rebasing. There has never been a quarter where the economy grew at 0.3%. And the reasons that were given, for example, such as, the maintenance work that is being done, that was third quarter. But by the fourth quarter, the average for oil production was on target, actually exceeded the target that was used in the budget. So we have the opportunity. So this is the point. What the IMF simply did was to take the Statistical Service, because it's the authority, and do a revised projection. So I would again, urge that we wait for the fourth quarter figures to come. Then we shall all have certainty. I'm saying that because in 2012, we did a budget with 7.1%. The economy ended up growing at 7.9%. By the third quarter when we did the budget, it was 7.1%. By April, the economy grew at 7.9%. So, and these are also some of the reasons we don't have to rush to Parliament now. It is important that we get the fourth quarter, because that will give us the precise, figure for growth. It will give us the precise figure for GDP. It will give us the exact numbers which we are getting now for expenditures, for revenues, because there's a lag always in our reporting as a developing country. And when we have got those figures, then we would proceed to Parliament in accordance with the Financial Administration Act and in accordance with our Constitution, because we have adequate provision, and this is a point for a lot of people who say Ghana hasn't got a fiscal responsibility law. We do have a fiscal responsibility law, only it does not include indexes like debt to GDP ratio, and the rest. But we have in our Financial Administration Act laid down procedures, for going to Parliament, lay down procedures for.
All right, Mr. Tepe, we want to hold it there and give the chairman the final word on the deficit so that we can go further into the productivity and wage, because Mr. Saga, you're a former employment minister. We really want to spend a few minutes there. So please give us closure.
I think I'm going to start asserting my role as chairman, okay? I'm chairman and I'm going to do it, or you come and be chairman.
Oh.
What we want is to be able to move forward. You are not helping us. Tony Akoto will say, give us a way out. Let me quote KB Asante in Daily Graphic, 3rd March. He said, when politicians are making pronouncements, we tell Ghanaians the good things government is doing for you and what we want to do for them. We never trust them that they have any responsibility to do something for themselves. Dr. Akoto says, let us try to sit down with labor and renegotiate this single spine. Where's the problem? I don't think the Minister for Finance is saying something different. This will be the first time that the two major political parties will come together on one and sit down with labor and say, the wage overspill, as the president called it, is causing a problem. It may be undermining the macroeconomic environment. Shall we sit down and renegotiate? Because when the economy loses growth momentum, it's going to affect labor. I think we should be able to take advantage of it and also listen from the public what you want to see on this issue. We are setting up the National Health Investment Fund for infrastructure development that will raise revenue generating. And we talk about VRA. If the pricing of utilities is not seriously going to be addressed, because we also talk about the huge expenditures on subsidies on petroleum products and utilities. The first people who scream when we are trying to increase, to make cost-reflective tariffs, labor.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm really sorry. The mic is not very loud, and so we are trying to work on that. People can't hear you at the back. All right. Yes. I just want to explain the context so you don't get me wrong. I was made to understand that after the presentations, there would be discussion on specific issues by the panel. The third part of the program would involve the audience. So I believe you misunderstood my attempt to bring Mr. Saga in. And so please do not, although you are the chairman, I just want to understand that partly because the program will be on air, and I think that the format is important. So with the greatest of respect, Mr. Chairman, I if you wouldn't mind, I would, yes, so we'll let them comment. We'll bring the public in at the last end of the program. So please don't misunderstand my rule. So Honorable Secretary, a quick comment on the...
Yeah, in fact, I was going to, conclude on the notes that, the points made by Honorable Akutose are important. And I wanted to remind the audience that His Excellency, in presenting the State of the Nation address, indicated that there will be a post-Ho forum on the single spine. So I want to assure the audience that just as was done in Ho, as many participants will be invited, and will take the lead in inviting, the other political parties which were in, some of which were in Ho for this dialogue. I also want to say that we are currently in discussions with Labour, and therefore I'm being measured in what I say here because we know the nature of negotiations. But I think that there is some discussions ongoing within context of what was put in Ho. But the public discourse should also not put the entire problem of the deficit, at the doors of Labour. As I said, I gave the reasons why we had a deficit. And Labour happens, cost for the public sector happens to have been the largest as a result of the single spine implementation. But on a structural way forward, and the chairman mentioned this, I mentioned financing, because part of the problem we have with the budget is the result of starting unfunded projects and putting them on the budget and expecting the budget, as I said, limited as it is, to complete them. Major roads, major power systems, and so it was an attempt to finish those that the borrowing of the bonds were done, which is again the source of the interest payments that has been mentioned. The solution is a refinancing, but the longer term solution is actually, as I said, Mr. Chairman, to change the structure in which the budget is financed. The budget, capital budget in particular, is long term, and recourse to World Bank financing, recourse to African Development Bank financing, or recourse to 10 to 15-year financing where we cannot get 25 or 40-year is the way forward. And this is one of the structural changes that I believe Ghana should, and this is also at the root of the Ghana Infrastructure Fund initiative and the debt management strategy that we put in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope this is not a debate between the current Minister of Finance and former Ministers of Finance. I think we were told that we need to come here and discuss the way forward and use our experience as former Ministers of Finance in reality to deal with the public problem. I have not gone into the private sector yet because I'm imagining that I was sitting in the office and President Kufuor says, what do we do? And he'll be faced with the same questions. I'm sure there are some things he cannot say that I say on his behalf. I don't disagree with some of the issues that he's raising. And my going on the labor issue is not to suggest that labor is the only problem. But the reality is that in the short term, and I cannot determine for them when they come to Parliament, but Parliament will rise in March. So the earliest is when we come back, because they cannot dictate to us when we come back. So I'm glad that he's been mentioned, but he did not say that he'll come. He says that he'll use the constitutional procedures. That I think it's good that at least they are considering that we must work it together. Because if Parliament does not put a check on the executive, and he mentioned one area where there's severe indiscipline, ministers putting items on the budget that are not in the budget. This is serious indiscipline in every government, from Nkrumah down to now. And the minister must put the check. He needs assistance from his colleagues. So if you're a minister of finance, you cannot be very popular. You must say no. The road minister comes and says, new road, no. And sometimes, excuse my language, if the president even comes, you will have to say no. So these promises that are given, whether it's free, 100, if it's not in the budget, how do you pay for it? You are going to replace some current expenditure with that. And it will affect the minister's budget. It will increase the deficit, and he will not achieve his target. Look, whether we like it or not, all the three major international credit rating agencies have downgraded us. That is the fact that we have to assist the minister to correct. And the immediate solution is by deficit reduction. That, for me, I'm clear in my mind. That's why I said there are areas that are no-go area. Public borrowing. It is a difficult thing. Once the deficits go larger, you tend to borrow more. And he said it earlier. The public cannot continue to borrow the rate at which it is borrowing on the short end. That's why you look for replacement financing partly through the sovereign bond. But there's a limit. There's a limit. Right now, the budget projects that they'll go out sometime, I don't know when, to borrow 1 billion. Just a few days ago, I read that Kenya has delayed its entry in the bond market because that they fear the interest rates. We are no different from Kenya. So even when you had a window, it could be limited. Because if you go and it's above the 7.85 that you got, then the replacement, it doesn't help you. So you are left with local. When I say local, domestic. And that's why I limited myself to revenue and expenditures. And those are what is in the line item. Look, let's look at the domestic capital expenditure. If we are lucky and oil revenues come, we are proposing almost 1 billion on that. The whole amount is 1.5. That is not enough to bring growth. But the more dangerous thing is that we are depending on about 1.6 billion for the Chinese money for our investment expenditure. That is why I'm not comfortable with growth. Because if that is what is going to drive growth, and in 3 years we've received only 600 million, then I'm not comfortable that 1.6 billion will come. So when I say the growth thing is challenged, that's what I mean. And so there's only so much you can cut from the domestic end. Goods and services, what are we talking about? Travel? Yes, you can put some fees on travel. But I mean, you're talking 1.4 billion. How much fees can you put? You pay them to sit there. So that is why I'm suggesting that 2015, 2016, somebody must signal some retrenchment. Look, the truth is that, and he will not say it, I will say it, because I'm not minister for now. That most of us, when we were ministers, we knew that we were not working with 100% of the public sector labor force. I can give a number, say that at best 40% of our staff were active. So what is the other 60% being paid and staying there? It's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but it is real. Go to every ministry. You can count the people who are actively working for the ministers. So why don't we begin to talk about that? And he mentioned the donors did not disperse. Why didn't they disperse? My understanding is that you reach some agreements with them. You must meet some targets. They don't disperse. They cannot unilaterally not disperse. So if whatever is necessary for us to get them to disperse by meeting those targets, we do that. That is our control. The external front, we don't have control. Are we going to predict the price of cocoa? No. We know the mining sector is certain. We know the oil industry we don't control. We may control output, but in the short term, there's very little you can do. In the short term, you can increase cocoa by much, mining output by much. Obuasi Newmont are laying off. That is a fact. So even revenue from business, I worry about. So we must cut. I hate to put it bluntly, some cuts must come. And as he said, I'm sure that he will engage his colleagues to reach this thing. And Parliament must play a role, which is to help in the negotiations so that we must all discuss the realities. And that, I think that I can speak for my side, that whatever is necessary to bring the deficit down, those on my side, we are willing to help the government achieve it. But the dialogue must begin. We should not be shy of any subject matter. Any subject matter. For that, we commend them for beginning the painful process of removal of subsidies. We should depoliticize that because it's costly politically. You can't do it forever. And now we are beginning to see that at least, even though Honorable Asaga has the duty to increase petroleum prices. Now, when he increases it, we all don't complain. We go and buy at a higher rate and cut down on our travels. So I want to say that the dialogue should continue, and we should assist the government, bring Ghana to where we can be, so that we can think about what it will take to grow in the future. There are a lot of things we can do in the future, but if the short term is not solved, then we have experienced that in 2001. And Ghanaians together, we came through till after HIPIC. We don't want to get there again. That's all our concern is. I thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I've been told to comment on the single spine and the wage bill. I think that first of all, the single spine concept and the wage bill was dreamt about and partially put in place between 2007 to 2008. And when I say put in, when you're disrupting me, you see that he's still bringing the heckling. So the thought of it was within those years. And a new administration came on board. And I think that the new administration should have called on all stakeholders to look at what this whole single spine means in terms of quantifying the wage bill properly. But I think that that was not well done, and then we plunged into a single spine situation. Only when we were midway, we found out that, look, the figures that we are talking of are unbearable. In addition to that, we had a lot of labor agitations, especially from the doctors. And they decided to introduce what they called market premium. Market premium was not properly defined. And that is an area we needed the Fair Wages Commission to come out clearly as to the definition of market premium. So market premium also added another bill to the already existing bill. Now, because doctors said they were professionals, other professionals like the pharmacists also said they were professionals and they wanted a market premium. Therefore, the definition of market premium became very amorphous. And of course, anytime very critical areas of services are demanding for an increase directly or indirectly as a result of market premium, government gave in because we wanted to save the situation. When I became then the injury time minister for employment and social welfare, of course, injury time players are called in to probably help to score a goal. I think I did score that goal. And I would say I scored the goal because I decided that we needed to sit down and define market premium, to the extent that the Civil Service Association of the ministries also wanted a market premium. And they had 2 demonstrations because they were looking for market premium. And that was when I had to put my foot down to say that, no, why are you talking of market premium? What is the definition of market premium? And the basic definition of market premium means a particular profession where if that person is not there, you cannot easily replace that person. That is what a market premium means. So if I'm in human resources, in Ministry of Trade, and I'm asking for market premium, am I saying that if I were to resign, I would not get people applying to become human resource managers in Ministry of Trade? That is what we call market premium. Therefore, we did not understand what market premium was all about. And I'm very happy that we were able to send a memo, cabinet memo, which was approved in cabinet, and then we decided to suspend this idea of market premium and to review it. So I think that, as Dr. Koto and the chairman have all alluded to, all the political parties must sit down together with the TUC, with labor, to discuss remuneration of both the civil and then the public sector. As to the chairman's comment that politicians would always come to only say the good side, I believe that if you are a doctor, you must give hope to your patient. So you don't just come and tell your patient that, these are the number of operations that I have failed. You've also to tell the patient that I have done very serious and critical operations and they have succeeded. Akoto was given a pessimistic view of economic indicators, and looking at the kind of target group here, these are what we call the business captains of this country. So I must also tell them that the future is bright and we are doing well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saga. Now, in consultation with the chairman, what we want to do is to pick comments from the floor on the two key issues.
It's 10 a.m. and you know what that means. It's time for News Desk. But it's a special edition and we'll join briefly the former ministers of finance who are discussing the state of the economy at a breakfast meeting at Alisa Hotel, just as you can see on your screen at the moment. We've heard from the finance minister, we've heard from Dr. Akotose, we've heard from Moses Asaga, who's currently in charge of the NPA, and there is more to come on the discussion, and we should go back briefly and take a listen.
A joint economic management.
Hello.
Yes, at the moment, the official records have it that over 5 million voters voted for the government in power, and then slightly less, still 5 million and something voted for the government in the minority. That's MPP, CPP, and what have you. What I don't understand is that why do we have only that percentage, that's the NDC representatives, which is slightly less than the official majority, controlling our economy? I think that despite our constitutional provisions of first past the post and all that, it's about time that we have at least a joint economic management and advisory team from the slightly less majority and the other representatives of the total population. That's the NPP, CPP, and all that. I think so, because when we go to the market as a woman, it's not my party card that is going to determine the price I get. When it comes to electricity, we are not going to convince the electricity company to give us the, electricity based on our party card. When it comes to water running through our pipes, it's not based on our party card. When it comes to fuel, so please, even if the Constitution Review Commission has not implemented their proposals, I think for the sake of us, all of us who voted, all of us who have the voting power, we must all be represented. The slightly less majority of 5-something million and the majority of also 5-something million. That's my
Thank you very much. We'll take a comment from Professor George Janbafo.
Yeah, thank you. I